My name is Sari van Poelje. I run Intact Academy. So I run schools for coaches, consultants, and leaders in 8 different countries. You can find me on www.intact.com. And I'm also an expert in business innovation. I help businesses innovate their leadership, cooperation, relationships with client, their purpose, and their way of doing business so that they can be on time to market. Now, what we've been talking about is transactional analysis, and I use that a lot to help leaders, coaches, and consultants to develop and to lead their people and to deal with human beings. So we've been talking about ego states, transactions, and ways that people maintain their own stories instead of being in the here and now. And one of the ways is called rackets and racketeering. We've talked a little bit about what racket feelings are, but now I want to talk about how you recognize racket feelings. Now, it can be pretty confusing because you can express every feeling as an authentic feeling as well. We talk about 4 basic feelings, and Thompson actually wrote an article about this, George Thompson. So we talk about happy, angry, sad, scared as authentic feelings. Anytime you express these feelings in the appropriate time and context, you can see it as authentic and not as a racket feeling. Authentic feelings contribute to problem solving where racket feelings do not. Now, when is it an appropriate time and context? Let's take them one at a time. So let's take fear. Fear is a biological reaction. It helps you in fight-flight. It helps you recognize when there's a real-time threat, someone who's crossing your boundaries. When that happens, and there is a real-time threat, it is really good to feel fear because it'll kickstart your adrenaline, and it means that you will probably react appropriately. So the time is, fear is here and now. So if you see a car coming towards you and you're not scared, probably you learned another racket feeling on top of the authentic feeling. So real-time threat, fear is appropriate in the here and now, and the context is there's a threat. Let's take anger. Anger is a really good authentic feeling the moment someone crosses your boundary. You see it sometimes in primates. So someone crosses their boundary, they immediately go, ah, ah, like this. Anger is really good for saying, hey, this is where I am. This is my boundary. Do not cross it. So anytime someone shows boundary crossing behavior and you don't show anger, or perhaps you show pleasing behavior, or you show other behavior, shame or guilt when someone else crosses your boundary, you know it's not authentic. You know it's a racket. Anger is really an authentic feeling in the appropriate time and context. And the appropriate time is here and now boundary crossing. And it is meant, the function of anger is to show people where your boundary is and to keep them out. I say this very specifically because I know a lot of women, when they grow up, do not learn to express anger very well. For a lot of women, expressing anger is something that's not done. They haven't been taught to do it, and they express fear instead. So I'm talking specifically to y'all out there. When is joy appropriate? Happiness. So happiness is appropriate in a here and now context when something actually happens, usually that could make you happy in the here and now. So usually that's attachment. So when people share intimacy, you see a shared sense of joy. Yeah. When people are happy all the time, regardless of what happens to them, it's usually a racket feeling. So I've got people in my team sometimes who are happy, happy, happy all the time. And it really bugs the hell out of me. And it bugs the hell out of me, not because I don't like happiness, but because I feel it as a racket feeling. They have not learned to express other emotions that might help them in the here and now to solve their problems. So happiness is appropriate really as a way to share joy. It creates connection in the here and now. That's the function of happiness, to create connection. Shared joy is something that is unbeatable in the creation of intimacy. When I see a sunset together with my partner, we look at each other, we share that sheer joy of that moment shared. Or when I dance, it's a moment shared, it's sheer joy, and it's appropriate to create relationship in the here and now. So we've had anger, scare, happiness, right? Or was it, yep. Sadness. Sadness is the fourth feeling we recognize as an authentic feeling. When is sadness appropriate? In the time and the context. Sadness is appropriate when something happens to you, when you've lost something. Sadness helps you deal with loss. Your tears dissolve sadness. That's what they're for. So if in the here and now you have lost something, it's appropriate to feel sad. So when people get angry about loss, sometimes I see people get angry when they've lost something. I think, oh gosh, you're not at that point where you can actually accept the loss and grieve. We all know there's lots of ways to deal with loss. There is a process in dealing with loss, but sadness is really an important part of that. So if in the here and now, in reality, you have lost something, it is appropriate to be sad. It can be loss of connection to self. It can be a job. It can be anything. But it's really important that you accept that sadness. It's more of an I'm doing this because it's more of an internal feeling where you get connected to that sense of loss. It is really important to grieve, because as long as you do not grieve and show that sadness, you will be stuck in that moment of loss in the past instead of the here and now. So what do we know? How do you recognize the difference between authentic and racket feelings? The difference is authentic feelings are appropriate to the time and the context. They have a function. Each feeling has a function. Racket feelings are not appropriate in the time and context, and they do not help you solve problems in the here and now. Some of the racket feelings we also recognize, except for the ones I mentioned, are shame and guilt. Shame and guilt are rarely appropriate for problem solving. Shame is when you've done something that you probably didn't have enough protection for. So we talk about biblical shame is when they didn't have the fig leaf to cover themselves. That's where it comes from. So often when I see people feeling shame, I immediately think, do they have enough protection? Shame does not help you solve the problem in the here and now, which is to get enough protection to do whatever you have to do. Guilt is also often shown as a racket feeling. Guilt is the curse of the over-responsible. It's when you take responsibility for more than 50% of what's going on. So guilt is often when we see people do something and then they regret doing too much or too little. Remember, when you do feel guilty, that you're only responsible in a relationship for 50% of what's going on. And if you find yourself regularly taking on more responsibility, you know that the guilt is a racket feeling. Guilt is also differentiated from something real. So if you've done something to someone, and in the real here and now, usually you could probably ask someone, how much pain did I cause you? What do I need to do to reconcile yourself with that much pain? So someone might go, you've caused me 4 out of 10 pain. You go, what would 4 out of 10 reconciliation be? Well, if you make me a cup of tea and you make dinner and then the guilt is resolved. If it's guilt from the past, you know you cannot solve that problem in the here and now. You go, how much guilt have I done you? And someone can't answer. Or how much pain have I caused you? And there's nothing that can make it right. Then you know that the guilt is a racket feeling. So Again, authentic feelings are appropriate for the time and the context. Racket feelings are not. We say all authentic feelings can be expressed as racket feelings, and guilt and shame are probably also racket feelings. It's important to recognize that, because depending on if it's racket or real, you will react differently as a leader, coach, or consultant. If it's real, when someone is scared, you offer them protection. When someone is sad, you offer them reassurance. When someone is happy, you're happy with them. When someone is angry, you help them form that boundary, you respect their boundary. So when it's all racket feelings, you have to ask yourself, is it real or not? If it's not real and a racket feeling, you help people get to their authentic feeling so that they can get past that and start solving problems in the here and now.